You know, there's this puzzle right at the heart of the New Testament. It's a central theme of everything Jesus taught, but honestly, it sounds like a major contradiction. He was always talking about the kingdom of God. But was it something that was already here, or was it something that was still on its way? Well, today, we're going to unravel that mystery.
See, on one hand, Jesus talked as if the kingdom had totally arrived with him. But then on the other hand, he was telling his followers to wait for it, to pray for it to come in the future. And here's the confusing part. He seemed to be teaching both things at the exact same time. So what's the deal?
And you could see this tension perfectly in his own words. Right here, he says the kingdom has come upon you. That's present tense, like it's a done deal. But then he teaches his disciples to pray, "Your kingdom come," which is clearly a future request. So which one is it?
Okay, so this isn't a mistake in the text or some big contradiction. Theologians will tell you this is totally intentional. It's a planned, two-stage fulfillment. And getting this is the key to understanding how the whole biblical story unfolds. It actually has a pretty specific name.
That name is inaugurated eschatology. I know, it sounds super academic and complicated, but the idea is actually pretty simple. It just means that the end times, God's ultimate reign, kicked off with Jesus' life and ministry. That's the already part. But it won't be fully finished until he returns in the future, and that's the not yet.
So let's dive into the already part first. If the kingdom really had begun, what did that actually look like on the ground? How did Jesus go about showing everyone that God's rule was breaking into the world right then and there?
Well, Jesus didn't just talk about the kingdom, he put it on display. His miracles, his healings, and especially his exorcisms were tangible proof. You can almost think of them as little invasions, sneak peeks of God's power breaking into a world that was often dominated by darkness and suffering.
And just listen to how direct Jesus is here. He's not being subtle. He connects his power over evil spirits directly to the arrival of the kingdom. Every time he did this, it was like a declaration. See this? God's rule is here, and it's stronger. It was a direct challenge to the powers of darkness. And then there's this incredible moment. Jesus is in his hometown synagogue. He reads this ancient prophecy from Isaiah about setting captives free. And then he sits down and drops this bombshell. Today, this is happening. Right here, right now. He's basically saying, I'm it. I'm the one who's bringing this promised new age.
So if all this was happening, why didn't everyone just get it? Well, Jesus explained this using parables. He said the kingdom wasn't going to show up with a big military conquest. No, it would be more like a tiny mustard seed or a little bit of yeast in some dough. It starts small, almost invisible, and then it grows and grows until it changes everything. This was the great mystery of the kingdom. It showed up in a way nobody expected.
Okay, so the kingdom has been launched. It's already here. But that brings us to the other side of the coin, the not yet. If the kingdom had arrived, why was Jesus constantly pointing his followers towards some future hope?
I mean, think about it. The very fact that he taught them to pray for the kingdom's arrival proves it wasn't fully here yet. You don't pray for something you already have in its entirety, right? God's will was clearly not yet being done on earth as it is in heaven. There was still a final act to wait for.
And this is, of course, from the Lord's Prayer, probably the most famous prayer in the world, and it's the ultimate expression of the not yet. It acknowledges that, yeah, the kingdom has broken in, but the world is still a broken place. It's a prayer for the finale, for the day when things are finally made right.
And Jesus talked about this finale all the time. In his story about the sheep and the goats, he paints this picture of a future judgment where the king looks at the righteous and says, "Take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you." That's clearly a future thing, an inheritance you receive at the end of the line. All right, so the story doesn't stop there. After Jesus' death and resurrection, something interesting happens. The way his followers talk about the kingdom, it starts to shift. The idea is still totally central, but the language they use evolves. If you read the letters from apostles like Paul, you'll notice he actually uses the phrase kingdom of God a lot less. And that's not because it became less important, not at all. It's because his focus shifted from just announcing its arrival to explaining the results of its arrival, all the amazing benefits people could experience right now because of Jesus.
And you can see that shift really clearly here. In the Gospels, the focus is the proclamation. Hey, everyone, it's here. But when you get to the epistles, it's more about the application. Okay, so here's what this means for you. The language moves from talking about the kingdom itself to what it means to be transferred into it.
Man, this verse from Paul just captures that already perspective perfectly. For him, this isn't some far-off hope, it's a past tense reality. He says believers have already been rescued from one kingdom and moved into another one. It's a done deal. It's your current address.
So, where does this all lead? How do the already and the not yet finally come together? Well, for that, we have to go to the grand finale of the whole story, the Bible's final book, Revelation, where we get a vision of the end game.
And there it is. That's the moment. The triumphant declaration from heaven. The time of tension is over. The competing kingdom of this world has been defeated once and for all. God's reign is now total and uncontested.
And this is so cool. Notice the direction everything moves here. The final vision isn't about people escaping earth to go up to heaven. It's about heaven coming down to earth. God's own dwelling place is finally with humanity, healing that deep separation that started way back in the Garden of Eden.
This is it. This is the ultimate fulfillment of that prayer, "Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven." The very throne of God, which was in heaven, is now established on this new, renewed earth. His will is finally, perfectly, and completely done right here.
And this connects everything back to the very beginning of the story. You remember, in Genesis, humanity's original job was to be God's representatives, to partner with him in ruling over creation. Well, that mission, which got so messed up, is now finally restored and fulfilled.
And that's the ultimate conclusion. It's not just that God's people get a ticket into the kingdom, it's that they get to participate in its rule. They reign with God, finally stepping into the destiny that humanity was always created for.
So all of this leaves us with a huge question. Living in this tension, this already but not yet, it isn't just a neat theological idea. It's really a call to a certain way of life. It means we get to experience the power and the beauty of God's rule right now, even while we're working and praying for the day when it comes in all its fullness. So how might that change things for you today?